Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the world will never be the same again. Explosions echoing in the heart of America, towers collapsing before our eyes. And behind the scenes, one name that could have stopped it all, George Tenet. But why didn't he? That question became one of the biggest debates, not just that morning, but for years to come. The 11th of September 2001. In a matter of hours, the symbols of one of the most powerful countries in the world were destroyed. Humanity would never forget what happened that morning, and the course of history would change. In retrospect, however, the question remains whether these terrible attacks could have been prevented. George Tenet, when he was head of the CIA, probably had the knowledge and authority to prevent this disaster, but why did it happen? Did the CIA really take the growing threat from Al-Qaeda seriously, or did ignored signals lead to the dark morning that changed the course of the entire world? George Tenet led the CIA through one of the most controversial and critical periods in its history, as the CIA struggled to cope with the new threats that had replaced the uncertainty of the post-Cold War era. Tenet was at the center of a reshaping of not only US, but global security. In the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, he became the focus of criticism and suspicion, but his decisions and strategies in the intelligence world were a turning point in modern history. Tenet's leadership was marked by a challenging path of successes and crises. While the CIA achieved many critical successes during his tenure, it was also marked by mistakes that caused worldwide controversy. But Tenet's impact is marked not only by failures, but also by strategic moves that shaped the complex political and military balances of the time. Whether his decisions were right or wrong, Tenet's leadership was a game changer for the CIA on a global scale. George Tenet has often stated that the CIA's warning systems were on red alert before the September 11th attacks. These statements went beyond a simple intelligence report and pointed to the complex and growing threats of the time. As head of the CIA, Tenet understood the importance of these warnings and the magnitude of the threat. However, there were serious weaknesses in the implementation of the measures to be taken against these threats. The lack of coordination and political will to act quickly made it impossible to prevent the impending disaster. The day before the attacks, the CIA was still seen around the world as a powerful and effective intelligence organization, but the events of the next day showed the world how fragile that perception was. At a time when the CIA was being described as frighteningly effective, George Tenet was struggling to overcome communication problems and a lack of coordination within the organization. But these shortcomings not only weakened the intelligence community's operational capability, they also led to a profound loss of public confidence in the aftermath of the attacks. This loss of confidence increased the pressure on the intelligence community and paved the way for the beginning of an era that bears the scars of 9/11s. One of George Tenet's most acclaimed qualities as head of the CIA was his personal charisma and leadership style. Described as frighteningly effective, Tenet wielded great influence within the CIA and around the world, but he gained this influence not only through his professional skills, but also through his decisive leadership. While criticisms of the causes of the CIA's failures vary, Tenet's competence as a strong leader has never been in question. He understood that launching a global strategy such as the War on Terror required not only military power, but also intelligence and diplomacy, and he brought these elements together by taking every threat seriously. He played a key role in shaping US post-war policy. In doing so, he distinguished himself not only as an intelligence chief, but also as an influential leader of the era. The attacks of the 11th of September led to a radical transformation of national security policy in the United States. George Tenet presided over this historic period as head of the CIA and played a key role in shaping the far-reaching strategy known as the War on Terror. But this war was not just about military intervention. It was a multi-dimensional struggle against terrorism around the world, involving intelligence, diplomacy, and operations. The complexity of this period, however, challenged Tenet's leadership. In the aftermath of the attacks, there was fierce criticism within the CIA and across the intelligence community, particularly about the lack of coordination between different units. Although Tenet defended the strength and effectiveness of the CIA, internal communication problems and operational errors led to some vital information being misinterpreted or overlooked. In particular, the failure to capture Osama bin Laden and the CIA's inadequacy in this regard became the subject of serious public and political debate and criticism. This period would be remembered as one of the greatest successes and deepest disappointments of George Tenet's career. George Tenet's tenure as head of the CIA was a period of struggle not only with external threats but also with internal challenges. Conflicts often arose between different parts of the CIA as egos, priorities, and different strategic approaches clashed. At times, such infighting prevented the organization from developing a broader, unified vision and disrupted critical intelligence processes. Tenet often had to take tough and decisive action to end these internal conflicts. However, these efforts were not always successful. Lack of internal coordination in some cases led to miscalculations, loss of intelligence, effectiveness, and ultimately important missed opportunities. In the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, George Tenet was charged with managing one of the greatest security crises in history. It was not just a matter of crisis management, but of paying the price for one of the biggest failures in national security history. Failures in the CIA's intelligence gathering and assessment processes led to a serious erosion of confidence in the organization under Tenet's leadership. This was not only a professional test for Tenet, but also an extremely emotionally and psychologically challenging period. September 11th showed the world how fragile the CIA's security capability, which had been perceived as strong, actually was. In the aftermath of this tragedy, however, George Tenet not only sought to put the CIA back on its feet, but also emerged as a leader in shaping counterterrorism strategies around the world. His efforts during this period became one of the cornerstones of modern counterterrorism policy and left a lasting mark on the intelligence world. George Tenet's tenure as head of the CIA was a turning point not only for U.S. national security, but also for global intelligence strategies. While the 9/11 attacks exposed the security weaknesses of the CIA and the U.S. government, the steps taken under Tenet's leadership shaped not only the security paradigms of the period, but also those of the future. The war on terror strategy that made his name is still regarded as one of the cornerstones of international security policy. However, Tenet's tenure is marked by strategic successes as well as major mistakes. Despite warnings prior to 9/11, the failure to take the necessary steps, the lack of coordination within the CIA, and the ineffective use of intelligence formed the basis of his criticism. Yet despite all this criticism, Tenet managed to become an effective figure in the global fight against terrorism, taking critical decisions in times of crisis with determination and courage. In conclusion, George Tenet's presidency was a period that profoundly influenced not only the intelligence world, but also global security policy. Although he was the target of criticism, his contributions, leadership, and decisions in the global war on terrorism have made him an unforgettable figure in history. The resilience and effectiveness of the CIA and international security systems today reflect the challenges and lessons of the Tenet era. His legacy remains an important reminder of both the fragility and the transformative power of intelligence.